Let's talk Wuthering Heights. This is, of course, the brand new Emerald Fennell adaptation, interpretation, whatever you want to call it, based on the incredibly important novel by Emily Bronte. It was the only novel she ever wrote because she died very, very young. It has been adapted numerous times for film and television. And what makes this one different is that one, all of the marketing is calling it an interpretation, whatever that means. And two, the title, Wuthering Heights, comes in inverted commas, whatever that means. When asked about it at numerous interviews, Emerald Fennell says that this is the movie that her 14-year-old self imagined while she was first reading the novel. I have many, many thoughts about that statement alone, but let's get the good things out of the way first. So you, Bahe, have never read the novel. You knew nothing about it. You went in completely blind. Am I right? You've never seen even the Ralph Fiennes adaptation.
I know the title Wuthering Heights, and I know it as this romance thing, but I've never encountered it.
Romance is a stretch, and I think this is the problem.
Okay.
I think in the mass consciousness, a lot of people think about it as a romance because many
Right.
adaptations have focused on the romance. However, previous adaptations have focused on what the novel put forward as, in inverted commas, the romance, which is a toxic love story. Wuthering Heights is this generational story, and the novel spans generations, and it is about generational trauma. It is about toxic love, and I think what made it particularly unique and interesting was how it took on this idea that love can be a bad thing, and how love, when it's toxic, can be utterly destructive. And of course, it has inspired many, many toxic love stories since its writing. Emerald Fennell has kind of taken this story and sanitized it for the TikTok generation. We live in a very anti-literary time. People want things quickly, they want things fast, they want things in 90-second sound bites. There is an entire group of individuals on TikTok who don't like reading books, who don't like watching movies. They're perfectly happy getting this stuff pushed to them in 90-second sound bites, and then they pretend to know it all.
Yes.
And this is what it feels like. It feels like Emerald Fennell had an idea of Wuthering Heights in her head when she read it at a very young age, but didn't bother to follow up. Like, she didn't bother to reread it in her 20s or her 30s and realize actually it's a completely different book. But you know what? I'm going to make that story I imagined anyway, which is somehow just the story of star-crossed lovers who are hindered by circumstance and then find themselves in a Romeo and Juliet tragic love story.
I found the movie as a movie completely acceptable. It was fine.
Correct.
As a 2-hour thing, it was completely fine. Not my cup of tea, sure, but it was fine. However,
I know I did say we'll get the good things out of the way first, and I didn't. But just before you say however,
okay, before I say however.
the good things, right? It looks amazing.
Looks great. Music's great.
Phenomenal.
I can't say I'm a Charlie XCX fan, mostly because I can't name a single song of hers. I don't listen to her, but like what she did for this film, beautiful. And the way it's shot.
Oh, the cinematography. There are shots in this movie that linger, like still today.
There's an interesting decision that Emerald Fennell made and her cinematographer Linus Sundgren made in that they shot this almost like a Western. It feels like, don't quote me on it, I haven't seen any literature on it, but to me it felt like they shot it like a Western. They could have easily leaned into the Scottish Highlands of it all and shot it like one of those BBC Channel 4 English Scottish Highland type shows, you know, dark and dreary and rainy. But no, they didn't. They leaned into almost the Midwest Texan colorful skies.
Yeah.
Sure, it rains. Yes, they're in the mountains, they're cliff sides, but they're almost always shot with this colorful sky behind them.
Yes.
They're shot in wide shots as Jacob Elordi or Margot Robbie are riding a horse across the scape, right? And I thought that was interesting and I thought that was beautiful. I will say that some of the shots you were talking about earlier about lingering, my only comment with that choice of word is that it lingers in your mind, but Emerald Fennell never lets the shot linger. And I think that's a bad thing.
I agree.
They've done this beautiful thing, and then she cuts away to do these really like jump cut montages, which just sort of like ruins the romance of the moment.
Emerald Fennell also hasn't met an obvious metaphor that she doesn't like. Like when Kathy's father dies of drinking too much, his body is laid out in a room with a mountain of bottles. Yeah, we get it. Nobody bothered cleaning the room.
2 mountains of bottles.
2 mountains of bottles.
Yes, there were 2 mountains of bottles on either corners of the room that he's in.
Thank you so much for that visual that we really needed.
A lot of those shots feel like Madonna music video shots.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
this is why I go back to being made for the TikTok generation. It's so obvious. It's so in your face. It is this faux sense of depth. It's depth for people who've never read a book or seen a movie.
It's also a faux sense of artistic setup. It's Michael Bay artistic setup,
Correct.
right? These are the kind of shots you would see in a Michael Bay music video with Meatloaf.
Which is problematic when it's being adapted from an incredibly complex and nuanced and difficult novel. And this is from someone who absolutely hates the novel. I acknowledge Emily Bronte's genius and what she did in the way she structured her novel and wrote this story. I just never liked the story because it was too miserable for me. Every time I read it, I was like, this makes me want to kill myself. Like, people are such assholes. But that was the point she was trying to make. And this is what I mean by Emerald Fennell sanitizing all the characters. I mean, she sanitizes some characters. She completely excises other characters. She changes characters up for no particular reason. But by sanitizing the story, it makes Kathy and Heathcliff not toxic enough. They're supposed to be unlikable. They're supposed to torment each other. And when you watch this, the torment that they inflict on each other stems from misunderstanding, from miscommunication. No, it's supposed to stem from generational fucking trauma. That's the point the novel was trying to make. That's why I feel even as an interpretation, it's incorrect.
And I think that's the interesting part. How far away do you stray from the original before you are not making a film of that thing?
Correct. Is Wuthering Heights the ship of Theseus of adaptations? Like, I'm removing this, I'm changing this.
Not only removing and changing, but I'm actively going against the point of it, right? So, for example, to take your ship of Theseus analogy to the nth stupid degree, if I take the pieces of the 7th iteration of the ship of Theseus and made it into a car, is it still the ship of Theseus? So that's sort of the big question at hand here, because Wuthering Heights, the novel, which I haven't read, has got a message that it's trying to impart, has got a story that it's trying to tell. However, if you change enough of the pieces that it no longer tells that story, is it still Wuthering Heights? You can call it an adaptation, an interpretation, a reinterpretation, call it what you like, but do you still then deserve the title Wuthering Heights?
And when you kind of distill the story into something so basic, the complexity of what Emily Bronte was trying to do ends up being every Tamil movie you've ever seen. Like, that's how this story plays out. Every tragic love story, Tamil movie or Hindi movie, is how the story plays out. And it ends up being so basic and predictable. Like, that's the problem. Meanwhile, the story of Wuthering Heights is far from predictable. Like in the novel, I'm not kidding when I say it spans generations, because it ends up being about their children and how Heathcliff abuses his adopted brother's son because his adopted brother abused him when he was a child, and how we can't break away from these cycles of trauma and how the children attempt to do so. And I agree, a lot of the adaptations don't bother tackling that second half, and a lot of them do focus on Heathcliff and Cathy, but a lot of them have gotten that righter than this. This one just ends up being for horny TikTokers.
I feel like Margot Robbie was probably the wrong person to lead this as Cathy. It really feels like a strange disconnect with regards to her age. I'm not saying Margot Robbie's old. Don't put that on me. What I'm saying is I feel like Margot Robbie's old for this character. I think the character of Cathy was written to be a lot younger, a lot more petulant, a lot more naive, and a lot more driven by emotion. First emotions almost.
And honestly, you can tell the age gap. Like, there is a 7-year age gap between Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie. I mean, Jacob Elordi is only 28, Margot Robbie is only 35. But in the context of this story, it would make sense for a 28-year-old Heathcliff to be interested in a much younger Cathy, given her behavior.
My big thing is that I feel like Cathy, the character, was written for someone younger. So just the optics of 35-year-old Margot Robbie being petulant and whiny comes off weird.
Yeah.
It doesn't come off as good acting. Nothing wrong with her acting. This is purely a character decision. I think Emerald Fennell had written Cathy as someone who's younger than 35-year-old Margot Robbie, and 35-year-old Margot Robbie looks like 35-year-old Margot Robbie. Again, not an age thing. I'm not ageist. I think Margot Robbie's gorgeous, but I feel like this was the wrong character for her. I was too distracted by the fact that there's this 35-year-old on screen acting like she's 19, acting like she's 18. That felt strange.
And we haven't even gotten into how they've changed up all the other characters and merged characters in ways that feel like it's creating unnecessary conflict. Like, the novel didn't need that conflict because there was plenty of conflict by itself between what was going on with your leads. And I think the problem is when she decided to render it down to just a straightforward tragic romance, you lose out all of that stuff and you need to bring in third parties to create the conflict and the chaos.
But the problem is the conflict and the chaos, as described in the film, come off as petulant, immature characters and not being caused by an external generational trauma. It just comes off as Cathy is this sort of middle class, pretending to be upper class. So she comes off as this really entitled person, which is strange. I guess in the course of the book, when there's an elder brother who's a dick, there's a loving father who creates a weird balance in the family. There's reasons for that, right? Whereas here, it just comes off as a strange, entitled, petulant 35-year-old Margot Robbie.
Which is why I feel like this movie is incredibly problematic. Because on the surface level, yeah, it's a good time, it's a horny time at the cinema, and all of that's well and good. But given the era that we're in, I feel like this movie does more damage than good with regards to adapting a popular literary work. Let's go back to what we were saying about when does an adaptation stop being an adaptation? And I think the greatest thing about film adaptations of books is how they make people want to read the books. Actually, sometimes it isn't even the movie. Sometimes the trailer itself does it. And there's data that shows that whenever a trailer comes out about a book adaptation, sales of that particular book tend to go up. And the problem here is that it is so misleading to what the book is, it can actually serve to put people off the novel when they actually pick it up to read it, because this is not what they're getting. Part of the conflict in the book also arises from the fact that Heathcliff isn't actually white. There are some scholars that believe he might be a gypsy.
Isn't that clear in that there was clear descriptions of him being.
Dark-skinned, yes, for sure.
It's very clear that he is dark-skinned almost.
And that caused an interesting conflict because it was a story about class, and it was a story about people who would do anything to rise up above, out of their station, just so they can live a rich and comfortable life. All of that stuff is completely devoid in this film. If it exists, it only exists because Margot Robbie is telling you so, as opposed to the circumstances dictating it. The other thing that is fine because it's an interpretation, but Wuthering Heights is not supposed to be clean and shiny the way it is. Yes, that is creative license, and I'm willing to let that go. But even that feels so over the top. I mean, the metaphor of the bottles aside, there is even a moment when Margot Robbie is rich and married, and she's actually fucking wearing rose-tinted glasses. I don't know why that drove me up the wall when it happened. I'm like, I get it! Thanks! You don't need to give her actual rose-tinted glasses.
But it's also... It also feels like she couldn't... Like, Emerald Fennell couldn't decide the kind of movie she wants to make. In that, like, Marie Antoinette.
Sofia Coppola,
right? And even Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. But there are these sort of popped up period pieces.
Yes.
Where they're not accurate, but they're accurate enough. But they're stylized accuracy, right?
Yes.
Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights doesn't do the stylized enough. So when things like rose-tinted glasses show up, it feels jarring because we've never felt anything else that feels that kind of modern in the film.
Unlike Romeo and Juliet when they're all using guns.
Yeah. I mean, sure, like the reason I sort of pulled back on Romeo and Juliet is because that's actually set in current time. But yeah, is that Marie Antoinette style of nobody would shoot a period piece about Marie Antoinette the way Sofia Coppola shoots that film. And I think she completely leaned into the popped version of a period piece.
And I think that's my problem with even using the word interpretation, because I'm okay with interpretations. I like it when artists are inspired by things and go wild. But this interpretation didn't do enough. It didn't give me anything different. Yet again, I go back to the fact that it gave me every Tamil movie I've ever seen. It's such a basic romance. Like, if you're going to interpret Emily Bronte, go nuts. Do something cool with it. Don't just give me pretty pictures.
Yeah.
Like, this is essentially a hornier Tron, is what it is. Because Tron was a roller coaster ride with great music. And this is essentially a pretty Wuthering Heights with lots of sex. Actually, I'm not even disappointed because I haven't been a fan of Emerald Fennell's previous works. For me, this is the worst one by far. Yeah, it's not necessarily surprising. I just didn't expect it to stray this far away from the source material. I don't mind when movies stray from the source material. I just think that in this case, it is particularly damaging. And I think it just feeds this era that we're living in. It feeds everything that is wrong with TikTok and how we watch movies and read books. And it feels like it highlights all of those shortcomings. Like, this one really felt like someone watched a video of TikTok explaining what Wuthering Heights was and thought they knew the whole story.
All this aside, I think my comments of this film would remain, but I would not be as hard on it if this movie was called Love in the Rocks or
sure,
something.
Of
you
course.
know what I mean?
Correct.
Like,
Absolutely.
Don't tell me this is Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. When you tell me this is Emerald Fennell's version of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, there's a problem, because now that I know what Wuthering Heights is about, this movie doesn't deliver that title. So I'm disappointed.
There is an article in Grazia magazine. I know we don't go to Grazia for any kind of intellectual content, but there is an article in Grazia magazine that is like, oh, forget the critics. This is a movie that was made for women. And I find that incredibly insulting because to women, not to critics, fuck critics. I find it incredibly insulting that somehow any kind of criticism of a movie like this is deemed as anti-feminist. But then here comes a movie that has undermined one of the most feminist pieces of literature.
This movie is anti-feminist.
In many ways.
Because all Kathy wants is to be with a man.
There is an interesting angle here, I think. An article, maybe we can get one of our writers to dwell on it for a bit after they've seen this movie. But there is an article about Wuthering Heights, toxic love, and how it feeds a fantasy. Because obviously it's not what women want in real life. But they want to pay $20 to watch it on screen. And there is that fantasy. It's the same with guys.
Yeah.
And
There's
action
nothing wrong with
movies
that.
or whatever, right? It's the same
Yeah.
thing. We're never going to want to do that stuff in real life, and we can't because we're incapable of it. But we want to pay $25 to see Arnie blow shit up. And so I don't think that's explored enough in the age of Me Too and all of this other stuff and male toxicity and alpha males and blah, 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 right?
There is a bit in this film that I found kind of troubling. Spoiler alert attached here. But there's a point where about 2/3 of the way through the film, Heathcliff gets into an agreement / arrangement / relationship with someone. And there is a breakdown of the terms of this arrangement. And I find that problematic because it is almost portrayed as she's okay with it.
So, in the novel,
Okay.
Heathcliff ends up with Bella, right? As sort of revenge on Catherine.
I don't have a problem with that revenge side.
No, the revenge timeline is fine. But in the book, his relationship actually ruins Bella. And she becomes a sort of shell of a person, right? Because he is cruel. And I think that's important because we're not meant to like Heathcliff. He's a terrible human being, whatever his trauma might have been. The way it's interpreted in the movie, however, is, like you said, something of an agreement, like they're in it together.
The movie okays the relationship because in the movie, it's Bella's kink.
Yes, and that's what I feel kind of undermines both Bella's trauma and Heathcliff's nastiness, because it feels like Emerald Fennell wanted to temper Heathcliff so Jacob Elordi could be likable.
And I think that's the
And
problem.
by doing so, I think she makes Bella less likable. Actually, she makes Bella less likable throughout the whole movie.
Bella's a loony bin.
Yeah.
I guess in that sense, it's writing backwards, right? You want to temper Jacob Elordi towards the end because you know they're going to do this thing. So you make Bella crazy up top so that thing that happens in the end is fine. Like, again, nothing wrong with kinks, consenting adults and all that stuff. But it kind of defeats the purpose of the book because, like you said, in the book, Bella doesn't come up roses on the end of that, right? It is not a kink in 1847. Bella is broken at the end of that relationship. Whereas here, it just feels like, okay, you guys are into some kooky shit, and that's fine because you're both consenting adults.
Like, the removal of the children really undermines what they're trying to do. There's so much that we can dissect, which is more than this podcast will allow for. But like everything we've discussed over these last 30 minutes is surface level problems that I have with this movie on a narrative level. Yet again, it looks fucking great. It's just not a great movie.
This is putting you on blast because I don't interface with any of this stuff. But can I ask the female listeners of our podcast who see this film, I'd love to know what their opinion is. Whether or not you know the original story. Sure, we're two married straight guys discussing this thing. And yes, we like to think we're being completely like the gender of the writer, the director is not a problem for us. The problem is the interpretation of the original material. But like you said, if this works for women, what does that mean for this interpretation?
And I think that's totally okay. Like, if you go to this movie and it works for you, and you cry because of the tragic love story, and you get turned on by what's going on between Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, and the chemistry is amazing in the film, and all of that shot beautifully, by all means, I think it's totally fine. And that's a good thing if you enjoy this movie. I just think that as a work of art, it isn't good, and it's problematic given what it's inspired by. Like, I think that if this was anything else, I think if she just wrote an original movie telling this story, we would not be having this discussion, because we would be caught up in the cinematography and the music and the romance of it all, and we'd be like, this is fine. It's a tragic love story.
Again, if Emerald Fennell called it anything other than Wuthering Heights and say it was inspired by her 14-year-old self reading Wuthering Heights and deciding to tell the story, that's fine. Again, change out the character names. But because you are basing it on the original, which I will say again, I have not read, but from the descriptions that I've read and things I've heard from you, stray from the message and the meaning of that original makes it problematic.
And people have done it all the time. West Side Story, Romeo and Juliet. It's just interpretation after interpretation after interpretation, right?
And that's okay.
It's totally okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. So I think, yet again, based on the comments we've been seeing, even on our Instagram feed, some of the DMs we've been receiving, yes, there are lots of women who have said that they've enjoyed the movie and they did cry at the movie because it was very emotional. But they also acknowledge, the ones who've read the book, that they were disappointed by how much it strayed from the book.
Right. Okay.
I think there are people who aren't super fans of the novel who can accept the fact that this is something different. I'm still waiting to hear from super fans of the novel. And I would love to know what they think, because I think anyone who's kind of studied this in literature or read it at a very formative age is going to be incredibly disappointed, because people who like this book really fucking like this book. Like, I mean, I've read it a couple of times, and I read it recently, like a week ago before going to watch the movie. I still dislike it with a passion. I can appreciate what she's trying to do. Like, Emily Bronte is like a Christopher Nolan of her time. Like, the way she unfurls her narrative and stuff, and there are actual fucking ghosts in the book, man. Like, Emerald Fennell could have done some cool shit if she had Heathcliff talking to ghosts. Like, that would have been an interpretation that would have been wild. That could have been really, really cool. Missed opportunity.
It's very, 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 very hard to do a period romantic drama with ghosts.
Sure.
You know?
Hey, man, Guillermo del Toro did it.
Guillermo del Toro is a much better person than most people on Earth.
That is true as well. That is true as well. We want to know what you think of Wuthering Heights. You've heard us go on and on about it for a while now. We are disappointed, to say the least. But if you go in not having read the novel, it is a perfectly okay movie. I think Bahe was okay with it. I think he would have even gotten a higher rating if after the movie I hadn't explained to him what the book was about. But tell us what your thoughts are on Wuthering Heights. You know how to reach out. We're on Instagram, on GogglerMY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my, or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.